The moment Layla Hassan accepted the CEO's mocking challenge to serve him in Arabic for $1 million, she knew she was crossing a line she could never uncross. His face when she responded in perfect classical Arabic told her that she had just detonated a bomb in both their lives. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Some moments in life arrive disguised as simple challenges, tests we think we can walk away from unscathed. For Layla Hassan, a 26-year-old waitress navigating the glittering world of Dubai's most exclusive restaurant, that moment came wrapped in arrogance and $1 million taunt. For Rashid Al Mansur, a tech CEO whose empire stretched across 3 continents, it came as a game he thought he'd already won. He saw her as just another face in the service industry, someone beneath his notice. She saw him as just another entitled customer who needed to be reminded that wealth doesn't equal wisdom. But when he threw down his challenge in front of a dining room full of the city's elite, neither of them understood that the collision of their worlds would crack open secrets that should have stayed buried, expose lies that had been carefully maintained for decades, and force both of them to confront truths about identity, belonging, and the price of denying who you really are. This isn't a story about money. This is a story about how a single sentence in Arabic became the key that unlocked a door neither of them knew existed. The Burj Royale restaurant occupied the 68th floor of one of Dubai's most iconic towers, a palace of glass and gold suspended in the sky. The dining room was a masterpiece of opulence, all white marble floors veined with gold, crystal chandeliers that caught the desert sunset and scattered it into 1,000 prismatic rainbows, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city spreading out below like a carpet of stars beginning to wake. This was where Dubai's power brokers came to be seen, where deals worth millions were sealed over plates of saffron-infused risotto and gold leaf desserts, where the air itself seemed to hum with money and ambition. Layla Hassan moved through this world like a ghost, graceful and nearly invisible. Her black uniform was perfectly pressed, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her smile professional and practical. She had worked at the Burj Royale for 18 months, long enough to recognize the players in this game of wealth and status, long enough to know when to speak and when to simply disappear into the background. At 7:30 on a Thursday evening, the restaurant was reaching its peak service. Every table was full. The low murmur of conversation in multiple languages created a sophisticated soundtrack. Layla carried a tray of champagne flutes through the dining room with the kind of careful precision that comes from thousands of repetitions. She had learned to read the room instantly, to sense which tables would be demanding, which diners would snap their fingers for service, which ones would treat her like furniture. Her manager, Carlos, a severe man from Barcelona who ran the restaurant with military efficiency, appeared at her elbow. "Table 12, he said quietly, his accent clipping the words. "VIP arrival, Rashid Al Mansur and his party. 5 guests. They're expecting exceptional service." Layla nodded. She knew the name. Everyone in Dubai knew the name. Rashid Al Mansur was the golden boy of the tech world, a 34-year-old CEO who had built his company from nothing into a unicorn worth billions. His face appeared on the covers of business magazines. His TED Talks had millions of views. He was handsome, brilliant, and by all accounts completely insufferable. The rumors among the service staff at various high-end establishments painted a picture of a man who treated waiters and drivers and assistants as if they were NPCs in the video game of his life, there to serve and then disappear. Layla picked up 5 leather-bound menus and made her way to table 12, positioned at the prime location near the windows where the view was most spectacular. The party was already seated. 4 men in expensive suits and 1 woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than Layla made in 3 months. And at the head of the table, Rashid Al Mansur himself. He was more striking in person than in photographs. He wore the traditional white kandura and the gutra, the headdress held in place with a black eagle, but even the formal traditional dress couldn't hide the modern arrogance that radiated from him. His face was sharp and angular, his beard precisely trimmed, and his eyes were dark and assessing, the eyes of a predator who had never known what it was to be prey. He was mid-conversation, gesturing with one hand while his companions listened with the kind of attentive silence that comes from knowing your career advancement might depend on laughing at the boss's jokes. Layla approached the table and stood at a respectful distance, waiting to be acknowledged. This was the dance she had perfected, visible but not intrusive, present but not demanding attention. Rashid finished his story, something about acquiring a competitor's company, and his companions laughed on cue. Only then did he glance up at her, his eyes doing a quick dismissive scan that took in her uniform, her face, and dismissed her all in the span of 2 seconds. "You're our server?" he asked in English, his tone neutral but something in his inflection suggesting this was already a disappointment. "Yes, sir," Layla replied, her voice smooth and professional. "Welcome to the Burj Royale. My name is Layla, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. May I offer you something to drink to start?" One of the men at the table, a heavy-set American with a Texas accent, immediately launched into a complicated cocktail order. The woman wanted champagne. Rashid held up his hand, silencing them all. "Actually," he said, leaning back in his chair and looking at Layla with the first spark of direct interest, Before we order anything, I have a question. Layla's trained smile didn't waver, but something in her gut tightened. This was the moment when customers revealed themselves, when the mask of civility either held or slipped. Of course, sir. How may I help you? Rashid's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You work in one of Dubai's finest restaurants. You serve the city's most important. Tell me, do you speak Arabic? The question hung in the air, and Layla felt the shift in energy at the table. The other guests leaned forward slightly, sensing entertainment. This wasn't a genuine question. This was a setup. I speak some Arabic, sir, Layla replied carefully, keeping her tone neutral. Wonderful, Rashid said, and now his smile widened into something that looked almost friendly but felt like a trap. Because I find it fascinating how many people work in this city, serve in this city, benefit from this city's wealth, and yet they can't be bothered to learn the language. It's a matter of respect, don't you think? His companions nodded in agreement, though Layla noticed the American looked slightly uncomfortable. She understood what was happening now. This was a test, a performance for his audience. She was the prop. I agree, sir, she said, her voice still even, still professional. Respect is very important. Good, good, Rashid said, his eyes glittering with something like amusement. Then I have a proposal for you, Layla. A challenge, if you will. He paused for effect, making sure he had the attention of the entire table. I will give you $1 million cash transferred to whatever account you choose if you can serve my entire table this evening in perfect formal Arabic. Not just a few words, not just enough to get by, but the kind of Arabic that shows real fluency, real understanding, real respect for this culture. The table erupted in reactions. The woman gasped. The American laughed nervously. The other two men exchanged glances that suggested they'd seen their boss do this before. Layla stood perfectly still, her face a mask of professional composure even as her mind raced. $1 million. It was a fortune. It was enough to change her life, to escape the endless grind of double shifts and aching feet, to finally pursue the dream she'd put on hold. But she understood the subtext of his challenge. He was mocking her. He was making her into a spectacle for his entertainment. Confident that she would fail, that she would fumble through broken Arabic while he and his friends laughed at her attempts. This was his way of reminding everyone at the table of the hierarchy, of who had power and who didn't, of who belonged in this glittering world and who was just passing through it in a server's uniform. Of course, Rashid continued, his voice dripping with false generosity, if you can't do it, if your Arabic isn't good enough, then you'll simply serve us in English as no harm done, just a little game to make the evening more interesting. He looked around at his companions, who were smiling now, anticipating the show. What do you say, Layla? Do you accept my challenge? Every instinct Layla had developed in 18 months of high-end service told her to decline politely, to smile and deflect and get on with taking their order. Getting involved in a customer's game, especially one designed to humiliate, was a recipe for disaster. But something else stirred in her, something that had been sleeping for years, carefully suppressed and hidden away. It was the memory of her grandmother's voice speaking to her in flawless classical Arabic. It was the memory of Friday afternoons spent learning poetry, grammar, and the deep beauty of a language that held centuries of wisdom and art. It was the memory of who she had been before circumstances had forced her to become someone else, before she had learned to make herself small and invisible to survive in a world that didn't value what she had to offer. Layla met Rashid Mansur's eyes and saw the certainty there, the absolute confidence that he had already won, that she was about to entertain him with her inadequacy. And in that moment, she made a choice that would change everything. She smiled. A real smile this time. Not the professional mask, but something genuine and sharp. I accept your challenge, sir, she said in perfect, flawless air, her voice carrying the formal classical structure that was reserved for poetry and religious texts and serious discourse. And I look forward to demonstrating that respect is not measured by assumptions, but by truth. The shock that rippled across Rashid Mansur's face lasted only a fraction of a second, but Layla saw it. She had been trained to read faces, to catch the micro-expressions that revealed what people were really thinking beneath their carefully maintained masks. His eyes widened slightly, his jaw tensed, and for just that brief moment, the absolute confidence that had surrounded him like armor cracked. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder, more calculating. The other guests at the table shifted in their seats, uncertain how to react. The challenge had been issued as entertainment, a game with a predetermined outcome. Layla was supposed to stumble through a few basic phrases, maybe get the grammar wrong, certainly fail to maintain the formal register required. Instead, she had responded with the kind of Arabic that suggested not just fluency but deep education, the kind that came from years of serious study or cultural immersion. The American cleared his throat awkwardly. The woman in the designer dress looked between Rashid and Layla with sudden interest, sensing that the power dynamic had shifted in a way she hadn't anticipated. Rashid recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair with a casualness that was just a little too deliberate. Well, he said in Arabic, switching from English now that the game had truly begun, You have confidence. Let us see if your skills match your boldness. Please begin by telling us about tonight's specials. His tone was pleasant, but there was an edge to it, a challenge within the challenge. He was testing her, probing for weaknesses. Layla inclined her head respectfully and launched into the evening's menu in flawless formal Arabic. She described the saffron-crusted lamb with pomegranate reduction, explaining how the chef had sourced the lamb from a specific farm in New Zealand and the pomegranates from a heritage grove in Lebanon. She detailed the Mediterranean sea bass prepared with Moroccan chermoula, the heritage grain salad with sumac and preserved lemon, and the dessert of rosewater panna cotta with crushed pistachios from Aleppo. Her Arabic was not just correct, it was elegant. She used the proper culinary vocabulary, the formal verb conjugations, the respectful modes of address. More than that, she spoke with the rhythm and cadence of someone who had grown up hearing the language used in its most beautiful forms, who understood not just the words but the music beneath them. As she spoke, she watched Rashid's expression shift from skepticism to surprise to something she couldn't quite identify. His companions had fallen silent, no longer sure if this was still entertainment or if they were witnessing something else entirely. When she finished describing the menu, she paused and asked in the same flawless Arabic if any of the honored guests had dietary restrictions or preferences she should be aware of. The American spoke up first in English because he clearly didn't speak Arabic. "I'll have the steak, medium rare." Layla switched to English seamlessly to confirm his order, then looked to the others. The woman ordered in hesitant Arabic, basic phrases that Layla acknowledged with grace. The other two men ordered in English as well. Finally, it was Rashid's turn. He looked at Layla directly, his dark eyes searching her face as if trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. "I will have the lamb," he said in Arabic, "but I want to modify it. No pomegranate reduction. Instead, I want it prepared with a tamarind and date glaze, and I want the meat cooked precisely medium, not medium rare, not medium well. Can your kitchen accommodate this?" It was another test. He was giving her a complex request with specific demands to see if she could handle the technical vocabulary and the pressure. Layla didn't hesitate. "Of course, sir," she replied in Arabic. "I will convey your request to the chef personally. The lamb will be prepared with tamarind and date glaze cooked to a perfect medium. May I suggest pairing it with the heritage grain salad to complement the sweetness of the glaze?" The addition of a suggestion, offered respectfully but confidently, was a subtle power move. She wasn't just taking orders, she was demonstrating expertise. Rashid's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, that will be accepted." As Layla collected the menus and turned to leave, she heard the American whisper to Rashid in English, "Where did you find her?" That wasn't basic restaurant Arabic, man. That was like university level. Layla walked away before she could hear Rashid's response, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She had cleared the first hurdle, but the evening was just beginning. She had to maintain this level of performance through the entire service. Every interaction, every request, every moment. One slip, one grammatical error, one lapse into English or informal register, and she would lose. As she entered the kitchen, Carlos intercepted her immediately. "Table 12's order?" Yes. Layla relayed the orders, including Rashid's special modification. Carlos raised an eyebrow. "Omancer is being demanding already? Watch yourself, Layla. Men like that. They enjoy making people jump." She simply nodded and moved to prepare the drink. As she worked, her mind was already 3 steps ahead, anticipating the next challenges. Rashid would test her throughout the meal. He would ask questions, make requests, try to find the limits of her knowledge. He had too much pride to simply accept defeat gracefully. Men like him, men who had built empires on their own brilliance, didn't handle being surprised well. They needed to reassert control, to prove that the disruption was temporary. 20 minutes later, she returned to table 12 with the first course, a selection of Middle Eastern meze dishes arranged artfully on small plates. She placed each dish in front of the appropriate guest while describing it in Arabic. "This is baba ganache prepared with smoked Turkish eggplant and tahini from Nablus. This is the restaurant's signature hummus, made with heirloom chickpeas and topped with spiced lamb. These are grape leaves stuffed with rice and pine nuts, a recipe that has been passed down through the chef's family for 3 generations. As she set down Rashid's plate, he spoke without looking up at her. "Tell me," he said in Arabic, his voice conversational but his intent clear, "how did someone working as a waitress in Dubai acquire such formal Arabic? Quite unusual." The question was designed to make her uncomfortable, to force her to reveal something personal, to shift the dynamic from professional service to interrogation. The other guests at the table perked up, interested in the answer. Layla kept her expression neutral, her voice steady. "I was fortunate to have excellent teachers, sir," she replied in Arabic. "One learns best when the subject is treated with the reverence it deserves." The answer told him nothing, while simultaneously suggesting that her education in Arabic had been serious and deliberate. It was a deflection, graceful but firm. Rashid finally looked up at her, and this time his gaze was different. The casual dismissiveness was gone. Now he was looking at her the way he might look at a business competitor, someone who required his full attention and assessment. "And where was this education received?" he pressed. Layla met his eyes directly. "With respect, sir," she said in Arabic, "I am here to provide you with excellent service, not to provide you with my personal history. Your meze course is served. I will return shortly to check on your satisfaction with the dishes. Is there anything else you require at this moment?" It was a bold move, setting a boundary with a man who was accustomed to getting answers to every question he asked. The table fell silent. The American looked like he was watching a chess match and wasn't sure who was winning. The woman had a small smile playing at her lips, as if she was enjoying seeing Rashid taken down a peg. Rashid stared at Layla for a long moment, and she could see him recalculating, reassessing. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not the performative chuckle he'd been using with his companions, but something real and surprised. "No," he said in Arabic, his tone shifting to something that almost resembled respect. "That will be all for now. Thank you for your service." Layla inclined her head and walked away, feeling the weight of his gaze on her back. As she moved through the dining room, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer just about proving she could speak Arabic or even about winning $1 million. This had become a battle of wills between two people who recognized something in each other, some quality of determination and pride that wouldn't bend easily. She had won the first round, but the game was far from over. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered a warning. Men like Rashid Al-Mansur didn't forget when someone challenged them. They either crushed that person or, more dangerously, they became fascinated by them. Layla wasn't sure which outcome would be worse. The evening progressed with the careful choreography of fine dining, each course timed perfectly, each interaction between server and guest following the ancient ritual of hospitality. But at table 12, the atmosphere had changed in subtle ways that only someone trained to read the room would notice. Rashid's companions had initially been part of the joke, ready to laugh at the waitress's inadequacy. Now they were quieter, more thoughtful, watching the dynamic between their host and this unexpected challenger with curiosity and perhaps a touch of concern. Men like Rashid didn't handle surprises well, and surprises that made them look foolish in front of business associates were particularly dangerous. Layla navigated the minefield with careful precision. When she brought the second course, pan-seared scallops with saffron foam and she described each element in Arabic that was both technically accurate and poetically evocative. When the American asked for recommendations on wine pairings, she switched to English seamlessly, then back to Arabic when addressing Rashid. When the woman's fork slipped from her plate and clattered to the floor, Layla had a replacement in her hand within seconds, presented with a gracious smile and a murmured reassurance in English that such things happened. She was performing at the highest level of her craft, and she knew it, but she was also exhausted. The mental effort of maintaining formal Arabic for over an hour, of staying vigilant for every potential test or trap, of keeping her professional mask perfectly in place while her heart raced with adrenaline was taking its toll. Her feet ached in her sensible black shoes. Her shoulders were tight with tension, and beneath the surface composure, her mind kept circling back to the same question. Why was she doing this? $1 million would change her life, yes. It would pay off her debts, fund her dreams, give her the freedom to stop living paycheck to paycheck. But there were other forces at work here, forces she hadn't fully examined when she accepted Rashid's challenge. There was the wounded pride of being dismissed, of being treated as less than human by someone who thought his wealth made him superior. There was the deeper anger at a world that had forced her to hide parts of herself to survive, to minimize her education and intelligence because customers tipped better when they didn't feel threatened by their server's competence. And there was something else, something she didn't want to name. The fierce joy of being truly seen for the first time in years, of using skills she'd thought were dead and buried, of proving to herself as much as to Rashid that she was more than the uniform she wore. When she brought the main courses, she found Rashid watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. The lamb he'd ordered was perfectly prepared, the tamarind and date glaze glistening in the candlelight, the meat cooked to precise medium doneness. She placed it before him with the formal Arabic phrase reserved for presenting something of significance. "May this meal bring you satisfaction and nourishment, sir," she said. "May it be received with the same care with which it was prepared." The words were traditional, almost ceremonial, the kind of blessing a host would offer an honored guest in classical Arab hospitality. Several other diners at nearby tables glanced over, surprised to hear such formal language in a restaurant setting. Rashid looked down at the plate, then up at her, and for the first time that evening his expression was completely unreadable. "You speak like someone who was raised in the classical tradition," he said quietly. "Your accent is educated, your vocabulary is sophisticated, and your grammar is impeccable. This is not the Arabic of language apps or evening classes. This is the Arabic of someone who was immersed in it from childhood, who learned it not as a foreign language but as a mother tongue. Who are you?" The question was direct, almost intimate in its curiosity. His companions had turned their attention to their own meals, giving their host a moment of privacy with the server. Layla felt the weight of the question, the danger in it. To answer truthfully would be to open a door she'd spent years keeping locked. To deflect again would be to reject what felt like a genuine moment of human connection, rare and fragile. "I am someone who serves you tonight, sir," she said finally in Arabic, her voice soft but firm. "I am someone who has accepted your challenge and who intends to fulfill it completely. The particulars of my past are my own." Rashid nodded slowly, as if her refusal to answer had itself provided an answer. He picked up his knife and fork and cut into the lamb. She stood at a respectful distance, waiting to see if he would sample it, if her recommendation of the heritage grain salad had been correct, if the chef had executed his special request properly. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something in his expression had softened. "This is excellent," he said in Arabic. "You were correct about the pairing. The grain salad does complement the glaze beautifully. Please convey my compliments to the chef." Layla felt a rush of relief and something else. Something warmer. She inclined her head. "It will be my honor to do so, sir." As she turned to leave, Rashid spoke again, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "I apologize," he said in Arabic. The words stopped her in her tracks. Rashid Al-Mansur, the man whose arrogance was legendary, who treated service staff like furniture, was apologizing to her. "I made assumptions about you," he continued, still speaking quietly. "I used you for entertainment without considering that you were a complete person with your own story, your own dignity. That was wrong. My challenge was designed to humiliate, not to discover. I see now that I underestimated you completely." Layla turned back to face him, stunned. His companions were engaged in their own conversation, not paying attention to this exchange. Rashid was looking at her with something that might have been shame, might have been respect, might have been both. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say in Arabic. "Your acknowledgement means more than you might understand." But she added with a small smile, "I still intend to win your $1 million. Rashid laughed again, that same genuine surprised laugh from earlier. "Of course you do," he said, "and at this point I believe you will." The rest of the main course service passed smoothly, but the atmosphere at table 12 had transformed entirely. The American was enthusiastically praising his steak. The woman was engaged in an animated discussion about Dubai's art scene with one of the other men, and Rashid was quieter than he'd been all evening, occasionally glancing at Layla as she moved through the dining room attending to other tables. When she returned to clear their plates, he asked her another question in Arabic, but this time his tone was different, less interrogatory and more genuinely curious. "Tell me," he said, "do you believe that language shapes culture? Or does culture shape language?" It's a chicken and egg question, I know, but I'm interested in your perspective. It was the kind of question intellectuals debated in universities and cafes, not the kind of question a CEO normally asked his waitress. But Layla realized that he was no longer treating her as his waitress. Somehow, in the space of this evening, she had become something else to him. An equal, a worthy opponent, maybe even a friend. The question delighted her because it touched on something she'd studied extensively, something she'd once hoped to write about before life had taken her down a different path. "I believe they are inseparable," she replied in Arabic, her voice taking on the cadence of academic discourse. "Language is the container for cultural memory, but culture is constantly reshaping that container from within. Arabic, for example, has over a dozen words for love, each describing a different stage or type of love. That linguistic richness shapes how Arabic speakers conceptualize and experience love itself. But that richness only exists because the culture valued those distinctions enough to create words for them. So which came first? Neither. They evolved together, each one pushing and pulling the other into new forms." Rashid listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. The other guests had stopped their conversations to listen as well, though Layla doubted most of them understood the rapid, formal Arabic she and Rashid were speaking. When she finished, Rashid nodded slowly. "That is a sophisticated answer," he said. "You speak like a scholar, not a server." Layla felt a flash of the old anger, the reminder that her current circumstances defined how people saw her, but she kept her voice level. "Perhaps, sir, the question is not why a server speaks like a scholar, but why you assume scholars cannot also serve." Rashid blinked, and then a slow smile spread across his face. "Touché," he said, slipping into French. "You continue to surprise me, Layla Hassan." She felt a chill run down her spine. He'd used her full name, which meant he'd been paying attention when Carlos had called her that earlier, or perhaps he'd asked. He was making it personal, breaking down the wall between customer and server, between his world and hers. It was flattering and terrifying in equal measure. "I will bring your dessert shortly," she said, stepping back into her professional role, creating distance. "Unless there is anything else you require?" Rashid shook his head, his smile fading. "No, nothing else, for now." The words hung in the air like a promise or a threat, and Layla couldn't tell which. In the kitchen, away from the dining room's elegant facade, the atmosphere was controlled chaos. Chefs shouted orders in multiple languages, plates clattered, and the air was thick with heat and the complex aromas of dozens of dishes being prepared simultaneously. Layla leaned against the cool stainless steel counter for a moment, allowing herself a brief respite. Her legs trembled slightly from the adrenaline that had been flooding her system for the past 2 hours. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to center herself. "You look like you've seen a ghost," came a voice beside her. Layla opened her eyes to find Amira, another server, and the closest thing she had to a friend at the Burj Royale. Amira was Egyptian, in her early 40s, with laugh lines around her eyes and the weary wisdom of someone who had worked in hospitality for decades. "Everything all right with the VIP table?" "Better than expected," Layla said, straightening up. Amira studied her with the kind of penetrating gaze that came from years of reading people. "That Al-Mansur man, he's trouble. I've served him before at other establishments. He likes to play games with staff. He likes to remind everyone of their place in the hierarchy. You be careful with him." "I am being careful," Layla assured her. But something had shifted in her tone and Amira caught it immediately. Her eyes narrowed. "Layla, what did you do?" "Nothing I can't handle," Layla replied, but even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. The pastry chef called out that table 12's desserts were ready, and Layla gratefully escaped Amira's questioning gaze. She loaded the elegant plates onto her tray, each one a work of art. The rosewater panna cotta was set in delicate crystal bowls, topped with crushed pistachios that gleamed like emeralds, garnished with edible gold leaf and a whisper of dried rose petals. It was the kind of dessert that cost more than many people's weekly grocery budget. Beautiful and ephemeral and excessive in the way that everything in Dubai's elite circles tended to be. As she carried the tray back into the dining room, she saw that table 12's dynamic had shifted once again. The American was on his phone, conducting what sounded like an urgent business call. The woman and two other men were engaged in a heated discussion about cryptocurrency, their voices slightly too loud, inhibitions loosened by wine, and Rashid sat slightly apart from them, his attention focused on something on his tablet, his expression thoughtful and distant. When Layla approached with the desserts, he looked up and something flickered across his face, an expression she couldn't quite read. She placed the desserts in front of each guest, describing them in Arabic for Rashid and in English for the others. When she set Rashid's plate before him, he spoke quietly in Arabic. "Sit with me for a moment." The request was so unexpected that Layla nearly dropped her tray. Servers didn't sit with guests, especially not at a restaurant like the Burj Royale. It violated every protocol, every boundary between the world of service and the world of wealth. She glanced around the dining room, hyper-aware of Carlos watching from his position near the kitchen doors, of the other diners who might notice, of the invisible lines she would be crossing. "Sir, I cannot," she said in Arabic, keeping her voice low. "It would be inappropriate. I have other tables to attend to." "I will pay you the $1 million right now," Rashid said, his voice still quiet but carrying absolute certainty. "Transfer it to whatever account you want before the evening ends. You have won the challenge completely, but I am asking you as one human being to another to give me 5 minutes of conversation. Not as my server, but as the intelligent, educated woman you clearly are. Please." The sincerity in his voice disarmed her. This wasn't the arrogant CEO who had issued a challenge designed to humiliate. This was someone else. Someone genuinely curious and perhaps even humble. Layla looked at Carlos again and saw him frown, clearly disapproving but uncertain whether to intervene when it involved a VIP guest. 2 minutes. Layla said finally, setting down her tray on a nearby service station. She pulled out the chair across from Rashid and sat down, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. The other guests at the table were too engrossed in their own conversations to pay attention. Rashid smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face, making him look younger and less severe. "Thank you," he said in Arabic. "I realize this is unconventional." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've been thinking about something you said earlier, about scholars who serve. It made me confront some uncomfortable truths about my own assumptions and prejudices. I have spent years building my company, fighting to be taken seriously in a world that initially dismissed me as too young, too idealistic, too Arab to succeed in tech. I worked 8-hour days, sacrificed relationships, missed my sister's wedding because I was negotiating a funding deal. I clawed my way to where I am through sheer determination and brilliance. And somewhere in that journey, I became the very thing I once fought against. I became someone who judges others by their circumstances rather than their character, who uses power to diminish rather than to lift up." The confession was raw and unexpected. Layla found herself responding to the honesty in it, to the vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "You built something from nothing," she said in Arabic. "That is admirable, but perhaps what you built became a prison of your own making. Success can isolate us from our own humanity if we are not careful." Rashid nodded slowly. "Yes, exactly that. I look at you tonight, and I see someone who speaks with the education and refinement of nobility, who carries herself with dignity, despite wearing a uniform that society tells us means you are less than. And I realize that I have no idea who you really are, what your story is, what brought you to this particular moment in this particular restaurant, and I find myself desperately curious about it." Layla felt her heart race. This was the moment she had been avoiding all evening, the moment when her carefully constructed boundaries would either hold or crumble. "I could tell you that I studied classical Arabic literature at university," she began slowly speaking Arabic. "I could tell you that I once dreamed of being a professor, of spending my life immersed in the poetry of the Abbasid period and the philosophical treatises of medieval scholars. I could tell you that I wrote my thesis on the concept of longing in pre-Islamic poetry, on how the ancient poets wrote about the traces left behind by departed lovers in the desert, how those traces became metaphors for memory and loss in the human condition." Rashid leaned forward, completely absorbed. "But," he prompted. "But life rarely follows the path we imagine for it," Layla continued. "My father died when I was 23, halfway through my graduate program. He left behind debts that fell to my mother and me. My mother's health deteriorated under the stress. I had a younger brother who needed to finish his education, so I made the choice that countless women throughout history have made. I set aside my own dreams to take care of my family. I came to Dubai because the money was better than anywhere else, because I could send most of my salary home to Jordan because I thought it would be temporary. That was 3 years ago. The bitterness in her voice surprised even herself. She had become so practiced at accepting her circumstances and not allowing herself to feel the loss of what might have been that she had forgotten how much it actually hurt. "And do you still dream of returning to that life?" Rashid asked gently. "Some dreams have an expiration date," Layla said. "I'm 26 years old now. My mother's health has stabilized but requires ongoing expensive treatment. My brother graduated and now has a good job, but he is supporting his new wife and expecting a child. The world of academia moved on without me. The colleagues I studied with are now publishing papers and attending conferences, while I memorize wine lists and perfect the art of being invisible." She met his eyes directly. "But I do not tell you this to evoke your pity, sir. I tell you this because you asked me who I am, and this is the truth. I am someone who made a choice to honor family over ambition, and I do not regret it, even though I mourn what I lost. I am someone who still loves the Arabic language with a passion that borders on religious devotion, even though I rarely get to speak it the way I did tonight. And I am someone who accepted your challenge not primarily for the money, though I would be lying if I said it wasn't a factor, but because you gave me a reason to be fully myself for the first time in years." Rashid was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I have made you an offer I intend to honor. The $1 million will be yours by the end of this evening, but I would like to make you another offer as well, one that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with recognizing potential that is being wasted. My company is expanding into new markets across the Arab world. I need someone who understands not just the language but the culture, the subtleties, the ways that meaning shifts across different Arabic dialects and contexts. Someone who can help me navigate those spaces with authenticity rather than the hollow diversity. Consultants who tell me what they think I want to hear. I am offering you a position as a cultural liaison and translator. The salary would be 6 figures. The work would challenge your intellect, and you could support your family while also building a career that honors your education and your passion." Layla stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. This couldn't be real. These things didn't happen outside of fairy tales. People like her didn't get rescued from their circumstances by wealthy benefactors. And yet Rashid looked absolutely serious, his gaze steady and sincere. "I don't understand," she said finally in Arabic. "You don't know me. You don't know if I have the skills for that kind of work beyond speaking the language. Why would you make such an offer based on a single evening?" "Because," Rashid said, "talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. I've spent my entire career looking for people who have that spark of brilliance, that combination of skill and passion and drive that can't be taught. I have seen it in engineers who were working retail jobs because they couldn't afford university. I've seen it in designers who were creating art on the side while working as receptionists. And I see it in you. You are exactly the kind of person I want in my organization. Someone who will challenge, who will refuse to compromise their integrity, who will bring perspectives I don't have. This is not charity. This is me recognizing an asset and being smart enough to acquire it." The business language was calculated, she realized, designed to make the offer feel less like pity and more like a transaction. But beneath it, she sensed something else, something more personal. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a way back to herself, back to the life she had thought was lost forever. Before she could respond, a loud crash echoed through the dining room. The sound of shattering glass cut through the elegant atmosphere like a blade. Every head in the dining room turned toward the source of the noise. Near the entrance, a man in an expensive suit stood over the remains of what had been a champagne tower. The delicate flutes now scattered across the marble floor in a glittering field of broken crystal and spilled wine. The man was clearly intoxicated, swaying slightly as he gestured wildly at a horrified Carlos. Layla was on her feet instantly, her professional instincts overriding everything else. She could process Rashid's life-changing offer later. Right now, there was a crisis unfolding, and it was her job to help manage it. She moved quickly toward the scene, aware that other diners were watching with a mixture of fascination and disapproval. The drunk man was shouting now, his words slurred but his anger unmistakable. He was speaking in a dialect of Arabic that Layla recognized as Saudi, his voice rising with each sentence. "This is an insult," he was saying. "An absolute insult. I am a valued guest of this hotel, and I will not be treated like some common peasant. Demanded to speak to the owner, and you bring me a manager. Do you know who I am? Do you understand what I could do to this pathetic establishment with one phone call?" Carlos was trying to calm him with professional platitudes in English, but the man either didn't understand or didn't care. His face was red with fury and alcohol, his expensive watch catching the light as he waved his arm. 2 hotel security guards were approaching, but their presence was only escalating the situation. The man saw them and his rage intensified. "Now you send your dogs after me," he shouted in Arabic. "This is how you treat a Saudi prince? I will have your job. I will have this entire building shut down. The word prince sent a ripple of nervous energy through the onlookers. Whether he was actually a prince or just a wealthy man with delusions of grandeur didn't matter. In Dubai, where the line between legitimate royalty and merely absurdly wealthy was often blurred, the threat carried weight. Layla reached Carlos just as the security guards were about to take the man by the arms, which would have been a catastrophic mistake. In Arab culture, especially among those who considered themselves nobility, physical handling by security personnel was the ultimate humiliation. It would turn an embarrassing scene into an international incident. Carlos, wait. Layla said urgently in English. Let me try something. Carlos looked at her with a mixture of desperation and skepticism, but he nodded. At this point, any solution was better than what was unfolding. Layla turned to the security guards and made a subtle gesture for them to step back. They hesitated, but something in her calm authority made them comply. Then she approached the drunk man, her posture respectful but not subservient, and began to speak in the most formal, classical Arabic she could summon, the language of diplomacy and royal courts. Your Excellency, she began, and the title spoken with absolute sincerity rather than sarcasm had an immediate effect. The man's attention snapped to her. Please, allow me to offer my deepest apologies on behalf of this establishment. It is clear that there has been a grave misunderstanding, one that has caused you offense, and for this we are truly remorseful. The man stared at her, his alcohol-fogged brain clearly trying to process this new development. A woman, a server by her uniform, was speaking to him in perfect classical Arabic, treating him with the deference he believed he deserved. Who are you? He demanded, his voice still angry but losing some of its sharp edge. I am merely a humble servant of this establishment, Your Excellency, Layla replied, maintaining the formal register. But I can see that you have been gravely disrespected, and this cannot stand. Would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you to a private room where we can address your concerns with the attention and dignity they deserve? Away from these crowds where we can speak as civilized people should? The offer was carefully constructed. It gave him a face-saving exit from the public scene he had created, framed his departure not as a retreat but as a choice to engage in more refined discourse. It appealed to his sense of superiority while removing him from the situation before it escalated further. The man swayed slightly, considering. The alcohol in his system was at war with his pride and his diminishing ability to sustain his rage. I should not have to leave, he said, but his voice was less certain now. It is they who should apologize to me. Of course, Your Excellency, Layla agreed smoothly, and they will. But would it not be more appropriate for such apologies to be delivered in private, with the gravity and respect such a matter demands, rather than here where curious eyes diminish the significance of your rightful grievance? She was giving him a narrative where he was the wronged party receiving proper restitution, rather than a drunk man being escorted out after causing a scene. The man looked around at the watching diners, seemed to realize for the first time how many people were staring, and some clarity appeared in his eyes, along with a flicker of embarrassment. He cleared his throat. Yes, he said in Arabic, attempting to regain his dignity. That would be more, appropriate. A man of my station should not conduct such business in public. Layla extended her hand in a gesture that was somehow both respectful and guiding. If Your Excellency would follow me, please. She led him away from the broken glass, past the gawking diners, toward one of the private dining rooms that the restaurant kept for special occasions. Carlos followed at a discreet distance with the security guards, but Layla made sure they stayed far enough back that the man didn't feel pursued or threatened. In the private room, Layla helped him into a chair and signaled for water to be brought. She continued to speak to him in formal Arabic, asking about his concerns, his expectations, allowing him to vent his frustrations in a space where he felt heard and respected. As he talked, the rage gradually dissipated, replaced by the maudlin emotionality that often follows alcohol-fueled anger. He wasn't actually a prince, she learned, but he was from a prominent Saudi family in Dubai for business meetings that had gone poorly. He had come to the restaurant for dinner, had been kept waiting longer than he thought appropriate, and in his intoxicated state, that minor inconvenience had been magnified into a massive slight. By the time the hotel's general manager arrived 15 minutes later, the man was apologetic, embarrassed, and ready to return quiet to the room. Crisis averted, the general manager said to Carlos as they watched the man being escorted out by hotel staff. Your waitress just saved us from a nightmare. That could have gone very badly. Carlos looked at Layla with newfound respect and something like bewilderment. Where did you learn to do that? Layla was exhausted, her hands trembling slightly with the aftermath of adrenaline. Practice, she said simply. When you grow up navigating family gatherings where honor and face are everything, you learn to de-escalate situations before they explode. As she returned to the dining room, she found that the other guests had returned to their meals and conversation, the drama already fading into the background noise of the evening. But at table 12, Rashid was standing, waiting for her. He looked at her with an expression that was difficult to interpret, a mixture of admiration, surprise, and something deeper. That, he said in Arabic as she approached, was extraordinary. You just prevented what could have been a catastrophe for this restaurant and possibly for that man's reputation. You did it with grace, with intelligence, and with a level of cultural fluency that most of my own employees don't possess. And you're telling me that you've been working as a server for 3 years? The question was almost accusatory, as if he was personally offended by the waste of her talents. Layla felt the weight of the evening settling on her shoulders. The performance she'd maintained for hours, the emotional whiplash of Rashid's offer, and now the crisis management. She was running on empty, her reserves depleted. "I need to finish my shift," she said quietly in Arabic. "Your table, your guests, they still need service. The other diners need attention. The restaurant is still open for another 2 hours. I cannot simply walk away from my responsibility." "You just proved my point," Rashid said. "Responsibility, integrity, competence under pressure. These are exactly the qualities I need in my organization." His companions had finished their desserts and were settling their portion of the bill, preparing to leave. The American clapped Rashid on the shoulder and made a joke about the entertainment value of Dubai dining. The woman thanked Layla in English for the lovely meal. The other two men were already on their phones, back to the constant connectivity that defined their lives. Within minutes, table 12 was empty except for Rashid, who showed no signs of leaving. He pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. 30 seconds later, Layla's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out discreetly and saw a notification from her banking app. A deposit had been made to her account. $1 million. She stared at the screen, her mind unable to fully process the string of zeros. It was real. He had actually done it. The challenge, the money, all of it was real. When she looked up, Rashid was watching her face. "Paid in full," he said in Arabic. "You earned every feels of it. Now about my other offer, the job, I am serious about that as well. But I realize I have overwhelmed you tonight. I have a habit of making decisions quickly and expecting others to keep pace, but that is not fair. So I will give you my card." He pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it on the table. "Think about it. Take your time. The position will remain open for you for as long as you need to make a decision. Call me when you are ready, whether that is tomorrow or next month. No pressure, no obligation." Layla picked up the card, feeling its expensive weight, the embossed lettering. Rashid Al-Mansur, Chief Executive Officer. Below that, his direct phone number and email. It felt like holding a key to a door she had thought was permanently locked. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate for everything that had happened that evening. For the challenge, for the money, for seeing me when others looked through me. Rashid stood and placed several large bills on the table, an extravagant tip even by Burj Royale standards. "No," he said gently. "Thank you. You reminded me tonight of something I had forgotten, that the measure of a person has nothing to do with the uniform they wear or the circumstances they are born into. It has everything to do with how they navigate the world, how they treat others, and what they do with the gifts they've been given." He extended his hand for a handshake, a gesture of equality. Layla took it, feeling the warmth of his grip, the sincerity in his eyes. "Until we meet again, Layla Hassan," he said. "I hope that will be soon." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the elegant dining room with a business card in one hand and the phantom sensation of $1 million in her bank account. The rest of her shift passed in a daze. She served other tables, cleared dishes, smiled at customers, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the evening's events, trying to understand how her life had just been fundamentally altered by a challenge meant to humiliate her. When her shift finally ended at midnight, Amira cornered her in the staff room as they were changing out of their uniforms. "All right," she said, her arms crossed. "You are going to tell me everything that happened tonight, and don't even think about lying to me. I saw you sitting at that table with Al-Mansur. I saw the way he looked at you, and I saw the commotion you handled like some kind of diplomat. What is going on?" Layla looked at her friend, this woman who had shown her kindness in a city that could be cold and ruthless, and decided she deserved the truth. So she told her everything, from the initial challenge to the final handshake, from the $1 million to the job offer. Amira listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each revelation. When Layla finished, Amira was silent for a long moment. Then she grabbed Layla's shoulders and looked her directly in the eyes. "You are going to take that job," she said firmly. "I don't want to hear any nonsense about it being too good to be true or worrying about what people. You have been given a gift, and you would be a fool to refuse it out of fear. Life doesn't offer many second chances, Habibi. When they come, you take them with both hands." But Layla wasn't sure if she was ready to take anything yet. As she walked out of the Burj Royale into the warm Dubai night, she felt the business card in her pocket like a burning coal, full of potential and danger in equal measure. Layla's small apartment in Dira was a world away from the gilded heights of the Burj Royale. It was a cramped studio on the 5th floor of a building that had seen better days, with water stains on the ceiling and a window air conditioning unit that wheezed and rattled throughout the night. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, and it represented a kind of independence she had never taken for granted. She arrived home at 1 in the morning, exhausted in her bones, and immediately opened her banking app again to confirm that the deposit was real. $1 million. The number still didn't feel real. It was more money than her father had made in his entire lifetime. It was enough to pay for her mother's medical treatments for years, to help her brother with his new family, to finally breathe without the constant crushing weight of financial anxiety. She sat on her bed, still in her street clothes, and stared at her phone. It was late. Too late to call Jordan, but she knew her mother would be awake. Her mother rarely slept well anymore, the pain and medication creating an erratic schedule that defied normal circadian rhythms. Layla pressed the video call button and waited. Her mother's face appeared on the screen, thin and drawn but smiling when she saw her daughter. "Layla Habibti," her mother said in Arabic. "Why are you still awake? You should be sleeping. You work too hard." "Mama," Layla said, and her voice cracked unexpectedly. Something happened tonight. Something impossible. Over the next 20 minutes, she told her mother everything. Her mother listened without interrupting, her expression moving from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. $1 million, her mother repeated slowly when Layla finished. From a stranger. And a job offer from the same man. Layla, this sounds too good to be true. Men like that, wealthy, powerful men, they don't give things away for free. What does he want from you? The question was one Layla had been avoiding asking herself. I don't know, Mama, she admitted. He said it was about recognizing talent, about opportunity. But you're right, it feels too easy, too convenient. Maybe it's a trap of some kind. Her mother was silent for a moment, her eyes studying Layla's face through the pixelated connection. Or maybe, she said carefully, it is exactly what it appears to be. A moment of grace in a difficult world. You have always underestimated yourself, Layla. You think because life knocked you down, you don't deserve to get back up. But you are brilliant. You are educated. You are capable. Why is it so hard for you to believe that someone might recognize those qualities? Because recognizing them and offering me a job worth 6 figures are two different things, Layla said. People don't do that. Not in real life. Her mother's expression softened. Listen to me, my daughter. When your father died and left us with nothing, when I got sick, when you had to leave university, you made sacrifices that no young woman should have to make. You gave up your dreams so your brother could finish his education, so I could receive treatment, so our family could survive. You have spent 3 years in a city far from home, doing work that doesn't challenge, sending money to us every month until you have nothing left for yourself. Don't you think you deserve something good to happen? Don't you think God might finally be repaying you for your patience and sacrifice? Layla felt tears burning in her eyes. But what if I take this job and I fail? What if I'm not actually good enough for that world? What if he realizes he made a mistake? Then you fail, her mother said simply. Then you learn from it and try again. But if you don't take this chance out of fear, you will spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. And that is a far worse fate than failure. After they said goodbye, Layla lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, her mind too active for sleep. She thought about Rashid Al-Mansur, trying to separate the man from the mythology. He had been arrogant at first, yes, but he had also been capable of genuine humility when confronted with his own prejudices. He had apologized, something men of his status rarely did. He had recognized her abilities and made an offer that seemed sincere. But there was something else, something she had felt during their conversation that made her deeply uneasy. The way he had looked at her, the intensity of his attention, suggested that his interest might not be purely professional. She had seen that look before in other men, the way they would focus on her as if she were a puzzle to be solved or a prize to be won. And if that was part of his motivation, if the job offer was tangled up with personal attraction or some fantasy of being her savior, then accepting it would put her in an impossibly complicated situation. She couldn't afford to be naive. Dubai was full of stories of young women who had accepted help from wealthy men only to find that the help came with strings attached, expectations unspoken but absolute. She had to be smart about this. Strategic. The $1 million was hers, free and clear. He had transferred it with no conditions, and she had witnesses to the challenge and her victory. That money could change her family's life even if she never spoke to Rashid Al-Mansur again. But the job, that was different. That was an ongoing relationship, a daily interaction, a blurring of boundaries that could become dangerous. She pulled out her laptop and began to research. She spent the next 3 hours reading everything she could find about Rashid Al-Mansur and his company, TechBridge International. The company was legitimate, that much was clear. It had started as a small software development firm focused on creating communication platforms for Arabic-speaking markets, and had grown into a tech giant with offices in Dubai, Beirut, Cairo, and recently London. Rashid had been profiled in Forbes, Bloomberg, and Arabian Business. The articles painted a picture of a brilliant, driven entrepreneur who had disrupted multiple industries and who had a reputation for aggressive business tactics. But they also mentioned his commitment to hiring diverse teams, to promoting women in tech, to investing in education programs for underprivileged youth. There were photos of him at charity galas, at tech conferences, shaking hands with government ministers and business leaders. In every photo, he looked confident, composed, untouchable. There was no mention of a wife or children, though several articles speculated about his personal life in the vague way that business journalism did. One piece from 2 years ago mentioned a broken engagement to a woman from a prominent Emirati family, but the details were scarce, clearly suppressed by lawyers and PR teams. What struck Layla most was the disconnect between the public persona and the man she had met that evening. The Rashid in these articles was a corporate type, smooth and polished and carefully managed. The Rashid who had sat across from her in the restaurant had been more complex, more human. He had been vulnerable enough to apologize, curious enough to ask genuine questions, honest enough to admit his own failings. Which version was real? Or were they both real? Different facets of a complicated person. As dawn began to break over Dubai, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Layla made a decision. She would take the weekend to think, to process, to separate her emotions from her logic. On Monday, she would call Rashid and ask for a formal interview, a professional conversation where she could assess the job opportunity on its merits, where she could establish clear boundaries and expectations, where she could determine whether this was something she genuinely wanted or just something she was being pulled into by the momentum momentum of a strange evening. She finally fell asleep as the sun rose, her dreams a confused tangle of Arabic poetry and champagne towers and the weight of a business card in her pocket. She woke late in the afternoon, disoriented and groggy. Her phone showed 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Her heart raced as she scrolled through them, worried that something had happened to her mother. But the calls weren't from Jordan. They were from numbers she didn't recognize, from reporters, from bloggers, from people claiming to be representatives of various media outlets. And then she saw the messages from Amira, sent in rapid succession starting at noon. "Layla, call me immediately. You need to see this. They're talking about you. It's everywhere." Layla's hands trembled as she opened her social media apps. The first thing she saw was a video, grainy but clear enough, taken by someone in the Burj Royale's dining. It showed Layla speaking to Rashid at table 12. The two of them engaged in animated conversation in Arabic. The video had been posted by a popular Dubai lifestyle influencer with the caption, "Who is the mysterious waitress who captured the attention of tech billionaire Rashid Al Mansour?" Sources say he paid her $1 million after a language challenge. The video had been shared thousands of times. The comments section was a frenzy of speculation, gossip, and judgment. "She's probably his mistress," one comment read. "Rich men don't give away money for free." Another said, "Good for her. Get that bag, girl." A third was more analytical. "I heard the whole story from someone who was there. She spoke perfect classical Arabic and he was so impressed he offered her a job at his company." This is actually kind of romantic. Layla felt nauseous. Her private moment, her personal triumph, had been captured and broadcast to the entire city. Her face was all over social media. Her name, which the influencer had somehow discovered, was being shared and dissected by strangers. The privacy she had carefully maintained, the low profile that had allowed her to work in peace, was gone. She called Amira, who answered on the first ring. "I'm so sorry," Amira said immediately. "I had no idea anyone was filming. The hotel is going crazy trying to figure out who posted it. Carlos is furious. The general manager has been on the phone all morning with lawyers." "What do I do?" Layla asked, hearing the panic in her own voice. "I just wanted to work, to send money home, to live quietly. Now I'm some kind of viral sensation. Do I deny it? Do I confirm it? Do I just disappear?" Before Amira could answer, another call came through. The number was saved in her phone from the business card she had been given. Rashid Al Mansour. Layla stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the answer button. This was it, the moment where her careful deliberation became irrelevant, where events were moving faster than her ability to control them. She answered. "Layla," came Rashid's voice, tight with tension. "I assume you've seen the video." "Yes," she said, her voice small. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had my team take it down from the original source, but it's been replicated across dozens of platforms. The story has taken on a life of its own. I'm calling because I need to warn you that the media attention is about to intensify significantly. I'm sending a car to pick you up and bring you somewhere safe where we can discuss how to handle this." "No," Layla said immediately. "I'm not getting into a car with someone I barely know just because a video went viral." Rashid was quiet for a moment. "You're right. That was presumptuous of me. But Layla, you need to understand something. In Dubai, when you become connected to someone like me in the public eye, it's not just social media gossip. There will be actual reporters at your door. There will be people trying to dig into your background, your family, your entire life. I have experience managing this kind of attention, and I can help you navigate it, but only if you let me." "And what's the price of your help?" Layla asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "What do you want in exchange?" A long pause. Then Rashid spoke, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Nothing, Layla. I want nothing. This situation is my fault. I made a spectacle of you in a public place, and now you're dealing with the consequences of my arrogance and my need to be seen making grand gestures. The least I can do is help you manage the fallout." As she listened to him, Layla realized something that made her stomach drop. The video hadn't just exposed her to public scrutiny. It had also trapped them both in a story that neither of them had fully written, a narrative being created by thousands of strangers with their own assumptions and agendas. Whatever happened next would define not just her future, but the truth of who she was, and what this strange encounter had really meant. Against her better judgment, Layla agreed to meet Rashid at his office the following morning, not because she trusted him completely, but because the alternative was staying trapped in her apartment while reporters knocked on her door and her phone rang incessantly with unknown numbers. She needed help navigating this new reality, and he was the only person who understood the scope of what was happening. The TechBridge International headquarters occupied 3 floors of one of Dubai. The building itself was a monument to modern architecture, all gleaming glass and steel that caught the morning sun and threw it back in blinding brilliance. Layla arrived at 9 wearing the most professional outfit she owned, a simple navy dress and modest heels, feeling underdressed and out of place among the sleek executives who moved through the lobby with purposeful confidence. A receptionist escorted her to the top floor where Rashid's executive suite was located. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, and Layla watched the floors tick by, each number bringing her higher above the city, further from the ground-level reality she knew. The doors opened to reveal a space that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office. The reception area had white marble floors, abstract art on the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Dubai's skyline. A young woman in designer clothes greeted her with a professional smile and led her down a corridor lined with glass-walled conference rooms where serious-looking people gestured at screens and whiteboards covered in incomprehensible diagrams. Rashid's office was at the end of the corridor, behind heavy wooden doors that spoke of permanence and power. When Layla entered, she found him standing at the window, his back to her, talking rapidly in English on his phone. He turned when he heard the door close and held up one finger, asking her to wait. "Please sit," he mouthed silently, gesturing to the seating area that occupied one corner of the massive office. Layla sat on a leather sofa that probably cost more than her annual rent and tried not to feel overwhelmed. The office was designed to impress, to intimidate. There were awards on the shelves, framed magazine covers featuring Rashid, photographs of him with world leaders and tech luminaries. The desk was an imposing slab of dark wood that looked like it had been carved from a single tree. Everything in the room communicated success, power, and the kind of wealth that built empires. Rashid finished his call and turned his full attention to her. He looked different in this context, more formal in his condora, but also somehow more relaxed, as if this environment was where he was most comfortable. "Thank you for coming," he said in Arabic, walking over and sitting in the chair across from her rather than behind his desk. The choice felt deliberate, an attempt to make this feel less like a business meeting and more like a conversation between equals. "I know you must have questions. I have about 1,000. Layla admitted. "But let's start with the most important one. How bad is this going to get?" Rashid pulled out a tablet and opened it to show her a compilation of social media posts, news articles, and blog entries. In less than 24 hours, their story had spread across the Arab world and beyond. The narrative being constructed was a fairy tale, the beautiful poor waitress and the wealthy CEO, a modern Cinderella story with an Arabic twist. Some outlets were treating it as romantic, others as scandalous, and a few were questioning the ethics of a billionaire offering money to service workers. There were even conspiracy theories suggesting the whole thing had been a publicity stunt. "My PR team has been working through the night to control the narrative," Rashid said. "But I need your input on how you want to be represented. This is your story as much as mine, and I will not let my team craft a version of you that you're not comfortable with." "What version do you want them to craft?" Layla asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. The grateful waitress who was rescued by the generous billionaire? The ambitious woman who charmed her way into his world? Which story sells better? Rashid set down the tablet and looked at her directly. "Neither," he said firmly. "I want to tell the truth, or as close to it as we can get while maintaining your privacy. You are an educated woman who is working in hospitality out of necessity. You accepted a challenge and exceeded all expectations. I was impressed and offered you a professional opportunity. The personal connection, the conversation we had that stays private. No one needs to know about your family situation or your academic background unless you choose to share it. But they won't believe that," Layla said. "People don't want the boring truth. They want drama and romance and conflict." "Then we give them something better," Rashid replied. "We give them a story about recognizing talent regardless of circumstance, about how the best people are often overlooked because of superficial judgments about their current situation. My company has been criticized for not having enough Arab women in leadership positions. This becomes a story about changing that, about actively seeking out potential in unexpected places." Layla felt a chill run through her. "So I become your diversity hire, your PR solution to a problem." "That's not what I meant," Rashid said quickly. But even as he said it, Layla could see the calculation in his eyes. He was a businessman first, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always looking for angles and advantages. The job offer had been genuine, she believed that, but it was also convenient. She would solve a problem for him while he solved a problem for her. It was transactional, and maybe that was fine. Maybe that was how the world of high-stakes business, but it made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't fully articulate. "I need to know something," she said, switching to English to create a little distance to make this feel more formal. "If the video had never happened, if this had stayed private, would you still have offered me the job? Or is this offer contingent on managing the public perception of what happened that night?" Rashid was quiet for a long moment, and Layla watched emotions flicker across his face. Frustration, defensiveness, and then something that looked like genuine hurt. "If you're asking whether I'm trying to manipulate you," he said carefully, still in Arabic as if refusing to let her create that distance, "then the answer is no. I made the offer before any of this became public. I made it because I saw something in you that I recognize in myself, a fire that refuses to be extinguished by circumstances. But I would be lying if I said that the current situation doesn't complicate things, because now, if you accept the job, people will always question whether you earned it or whether I gave it to you because of the attention. And that's not fair to you." Layla felt some of her anger dissipate. He was right. The video had poisoned the well, had made it impossible for her to accept his offer without it being viewed through the lens of public spectacle. Even if she was qualified, even if she excelled in the role, there would always be whispers about how she got there. A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman in an expensive pantsuit entered, carrying a leather portfolio. She was in her 40s, sharply dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from years and positions of power. Almancer, she said in English, then noticed Layla and switched to polite acknowledgement. "You must be Ms. Hassan, I'm Fatima Al-Rashid, head of communications for TechBridge International. I've been coordinating our response to the media interest in your story. Layla stood to shake her hand, immediately feeling evaluated and assessed by this woman's sharp gaze. Fatima gestured for everyone to sit and opened her portfolio to reveal a detailed media strategy document. We have 3 potential paths forward, she began, her tone professional and detached. Option 1, we release a joint statement saying this was a private moment that was captured without your permission, and we ask for your privacy to be respected while maintaining that Olmancer was impressed by your skills and has extended a professional opportunity. This frames it as a serious business matter and downplays the personal element. Option 2, we lean into the narrative that's already being created. We give an exclusive interview to a major outlet, tell the story on your terms, control the message. This satisfies the public curiosity and allows us to shape how you're perceived. Option 3, we say nothing. We let the story die down naturally, which it will eventually, and in a few months when you start working here, you choose to accept the position. It's old news. Each option has advantages and risks, which I can detail if you'd like. Layla looked at Rashid, who was watching her carefully, clearly trying to gauge her reaction. This was his world. A world where every interaction was strategized, where spontaneous human moments were immediately processed through the lens of public relations and brand management. It was exhausting just witnessing it. What do you recommend? Rashid asked Fatima, but his eyes stayed on Layla. Fatima didn't hesitate. Option 2, give the interview, control the narrative, humanize both of you. The current story is being written by strangers with no stake in your truth. Better to write it yourselves. Plus, it positions Ms. Hassan as someone with agency in this situation, rather than as someone things happen to. It's empowering rather than victimizing. Layla felt like she was watching her life being discussed as if it were a product to be marketed. No, she said suddenly, surprising everyone, including herself. I don't want any of those options. Rashid and Fatima both looked at her expectantly. Explain, Rashid said gently. Layla took a breath, trying to organize her thoughts. Every option you've presented assumes that I need to respond to what other people are saying about me, but I didn't do anything wrong. I went to work, I accepted a challenge, I won it fairly, and I received the prize. Everything else, the speculation, the gossip, the theories, that's not my responsibility to manage. I won't participate in turning my life into a press. Fatima's expression shifted to something like respect. That's actually a 4th option, and it's not a bad one. Dignified silence. But you need to understand that without a response from you, the story will be whatever people want it to be. You'll have no control over your own narrative. Maybe I don't want control, Layla said. Maybe I just want to go back to being invisible. That's no longer possible, Rashid said quietly. Once you've been seen, you can't unsee yourself. Believe me, I know. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, old wounds that hadn't fully healed. Layla looked at him and saw not the billionaire CEO, but someone who understood what it was like to have your private self become public property, to have every action analyzed and judged by people who didn't know you. What happened to you? She asked. What made you build these walls? Fatima cleared her throat uncomfortably, recognizing that this conversation had veered into territory that was too personal for a business meeting. I'll step out and give you two some privacy, she said, gathering her portfolio. Olmancer, I'll need a decision on our media strategy by end of day. She left, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. Rashid stood and walked back to the window, his posture tense. You asked me earlier if I would have offered you the job if the video hadn't happened, he said, speaking to his reflection in the glass. Let me ask you something in return. If I hadn't been wealthy, if I had been just another customer in that restaurant, would you have sat down and talked with me the way you did? Would you have shared your story? Or would you have kept your professional distance and moved on to the next table? Layla considered the question honestly. I don't know, she admitted. Probably not. I've learned that personal connections with customers usually end badly. People either want something from you or they want to save you, and neither of those things respect who you actually are. Exact, Rashid said, turning to face her. Everything in my life is transactional now. Every friendship, every relationship, every interaction has some element of calculation behind it. People want access to my money, my network, my influence. They see me as a resource to be exploited or an obstacle to be overcome. I have forgotten what it feels like to just be seen as a person, flaws and all, without the complications of everything else. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was raw with honesty. So when you sat across from me and challenged me, when you refused to be diminished by my assumptions, when you shared pieces of yourself without asking for anything in return, it was the first genuine human interaction I'd had in months, maybe years. And yes, that made me want to know you better. Not as a diversity hire, not as a PR solution, but as someone who reminded me of what I'd lost in my pursuit of success. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous. Layla felt the weight of it, the responsibility of being seen as someone's salvation or redemption. It was too much, too fast, too complicated. I think I need time, she said finally. It's time to process all of this. Time to figure out what I want independent of what you're offering, independent of what the public thinks. Can you give me that? Rashid nodded slowly. Of course, take all the time. The job offer stands regardless of what you decide about everything else. But Layla, he added as she stood to leave, don't let fear keep you from claiming what you deserve. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not what feels safest. As she left his office and made her way back through the corridors of power, past the conference rooms and the busy professionals, Layla realized that Rashid's final words had struck at something essential. She had spent 3 years playing it safe, making herself small, accepting less than she was worth because it was easier than fighting for more. But safety had a cost, and that cost was the slow erosion of the person she had once been. The question now was whether she had the courage to become that person. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Layla didn't return to work at the Burj Royale. Carlos had called to tell her that management thought it best if she took a leave of absence until the media attention died down. Her presence in the restaurant had become a distraction, with diners trying to take photos and reporters attempting to make reservations just to see her. The leave was paid, Carlos assured her, and her position would be waiting when she was ready to return. But both of them understood the subtext. Her life as an invisible server was over. She couldn't go back to that even if she wanted to. Layla spent those days in her apartment, fielding calls from her mother, who was simultaneously proud and worried, from her brother, who wanted to know if Rashid Al-Mansur's intentions were honorable, and from Amira, who brought her food and gossip from the restaurant. The media frenzy had indeed begun to die down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher stories. But the internet was forever, and her face was now permanently associated with the viral video. On the 4th morning, Layla woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She knew what she needed to do, but it required courage she wasn't sure she possessed. She needed to go back to the beginning, to the source of everything she had lost and everything she might reclaim. She needed to visit her old university. The American University in Dubai sat on a pristine campus that felt like an oasis of learning in the middle of the city's commercial frenzy. Layla hadn't been back since she'd withdrawn from her graduate program 3 years ago. Walking through the gates felt like stepping back in time, like visiting the ghost of who she used to be. The Arabic language and literature department was housed in a building near the center of campus, its architecture a blend of modern design and traditional Islamic geometric patterns. Layla made her way to the 3rd floor, where her former advisor, Dr. Khalil Mansour, still had his office. She hadn't called ahead, wasn't sure he would even remember her or agree to see her, but when she knocked on his door and heard his voice call out in Arabic to enter, she felt a rush of nostalgia so powerful it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Dr. Mansour was in his 60s, a Palestinian scholar who had dedicated his life to preserving and teaching classical Arabic literature. He looked up from his desk, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and for a moment his expression was blank. Then recognition dawned, followed by genuine delight. "Layla Hassan," he said, standing immediately and coming around his desk to embrace her in the traditional manner. "My dear student, I had wondered what became of you. Please, sit, tell me everything." Over the next hour, Layla told him about her father's death, her family's financial crisis, her decision to leave the program. She told him about working at the Burj Royale, about the slow dimming of her intellectual life, about the challenge from Rashid and everything that had followed. Dr. Mansour listened with the same attentive patience he had shown in seminars, never interrupting, his eyes sharp and thoughtful behind his glasses. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and went to his bookshelf, pulling down a worn copy of a collection of pre-Islamic poetry. He opened it to a page he seemed to know by heart and read aloud in Arabic, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of classical recitation. It was a poem by the ancient poet Tarafa ibn al-Abid, verses about a man contemplating his mortality and the legacy he would leave behind. Dr. Mansour closed the book and looked at Layla. "Do you remember what we discussed about this poem in your first year of graduate study?" Layla searched her memory and found it there, preserved like amber. "We talked about how Tarafi was caught between two worlds. He was educated and sensitive, but he was also from a warrior tribe that valued physical courage over intellectual pursuits. His poetry was his attempt to reconcile those two identities." "Exactly," Dr. Mansour said. "And what was his conclusion?" "That both forms of courage were necessary," Layla said slowly, understanding why he had chosen this particular poem. "That to live fully meant embracing all parts of yourself, not just the parts that were convenient or acceptable to others." Dr. Mansour sat back down and folded his hands on his desk. "Layla, you came here today because you are standing at a crossroads and you don't know which path to take, but I think you do. No, you're just afraid that choosing one path means betraying everything you've sacrificed for. Am I right?" The accuracy of his assessment took her breath away. He had always been able to see through her defenses, to understand the questions she was really asking beneath the ones she voiced. "I gave up everything for my family," she said quietly. "My education, my dreams, my future, and I don't regret it because they needed me and I loved them. But if I take this job, if I go back to that world, it feels like I'm saying those sacrifices were wasted, that I should have been more selfish, that I should have chosen myself over them. Does it, Doctor? Mansour asked gently. Or does it mean that your sacrifices created the foundation for this new opportunity? So you didn't abandon your education, Layla. You carried it with you into every moment of the last 3 years. That knowledge, that love of language, that depth of understanding, it was still there even when you were serving tables. It was still you. And now someone has recognized it and offered you a chance to use it again. That's not a betrayal of your sacrifices. That's the vindication of them. Layla felt something break open inside her, some knot of guilt and grief that had been strangling her heart. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared I won't be good enough. I'm scared that I've forgotten how to be the person I was. I'm scared that this opportunity is too good to be true and it will all fall apart. Of course you're scared, Doctor, Mansour said. Only fools and liars claim to be without fear when facing something that matters. But let me tell you something about this man who challenged you, this Rashid Mansour. I have been following his career with interest because he represents something rare in our world. He is someone who has achieved massive success without abandoning his cultural identity, who has built a global company while insisting that Arabic and Arab voices matter in the tech world. He is not perfect, I'm sure. No one with that much power and wealth can be, but he is trying to do something meaningful. If he has offered you a role in that mission, perhaps you should consider that it's not just about what he can give you, but about what you can contribute to something larger than yourself. The perspective shifted something in Layla's thinking. She had been so focused on whether she deserved the opportunity, whether she was being manipulated, whether she could trust Rashid's motives, that she hadn't considered the actual work itself. What if this wasn't just about her personal redemption or his corporate image? What if there was genuine value in helping a company bridge cultural divides, in ensuring that Arabic speakers had technology designed with their language and culture in mind, in being part of something that mattered? Before she left, Dr. Mansour gave her his card with his personal number written on the back. If you take this position, he said, and you find yourself struggling or doubting, call me. I may not be able to help with the business aspects, but I can remind you of who you are and where you come from. That knowledge is your greatest strength, not your weakness. Layla left the campus feeling lighter than she had in days. She pulled out her phone and stared at Rashid's contact information. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long moment, then she pressed it. He answered on the second ring. Layla, he said, and she could hear both surprise and something like relief in his voice. I'm ready to talk, she said, but not at your office. Somewhere neutral, somewhere public. I want to discuss the actual job, the real responsibilities and expectations, without all the complications of everything else. Where would you like to meet? Rashid asked. The Dubai Fountain, Layla said. Tonight at 8. I'll meet you there. It was a bold choice, she realized after hanging up. The Dubai Fountain, with its choreographed water shows and crowds of tourists, was one of the city's most public spaces. There would be no privacy, no possibility of an intimate conversation, but that was exactly the point. She needed to reset their dynamic, to establish that whatever happened next would be on her terms, in a space where they were just two people in a crowd rather than a CEO and a potential employee in his domain of power. That evening, Layla arrived at the fountain 15 minutes early. She had dressed carefully in modest but elegant clothes, wanting to look professional but not like she was trying too hard. The fountain was already drawing crowds, people gathering for the evening show. The massive structure stretched out before her, dormant now but promising spectacle. She found a spot near the railing with a view of both the fountain and the Burj Khalifa rising behind it, that impossible tower of light and steel that seemed to touch the stars. Rashid arrived exactly at 8, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a simple white shirt. No kandura, no visible markers of his wealth except for the expensive watch on his wrist. He saw her and smiled, walking over with his hands in his pockets. This is unexpected, he said in Arabic. I assumed you'd want to meet somewhere private. That's exactly why I chose here, Layla replied. I need us to stop treating this like it's some secret romance or corporate intrigue. I need it to be what it actually is, a professional discussion about a job opportunity. Fair enough, Rashid said, leaning against the railing beside her. So let's discuss the job. For real this time. What exactly would I be doing? Over the next hour, as the fountain performed its shows every 15 minutes, sending water dancing into the air in perfect synchronization with music, Rashid outlined the position. It was more substantive than she had expected. He wanted someone to lead a new cultural consulting division that would work across all of the company's products and services. She would assess their platforms for cultural sensitivity, work with developers to ensure Arabic language support was authentic and not just machine consult on marketing campaigns aimed at Arab market, and eventually build a team of specialists from different regions to represent the full diversity of the Arabic-speaking world. It's not a symbolic position, Rashid emphasized, so you would have real authority and real budget. You would be at the table for major strategic decisions. And yes, there would be challenges. You'd be working with mostly male engineers and executives who might not take you seriously at first. You'd be dealing with the complexity of representing cultures that have significant differences despite sharing a language. You'd be building something from nothing, which is exhilarating but also exhausting. But I think you can do it. More than that, I think you're exactly the person who should do it. Layla listened to the specifics, asking detailed questions about reporting structure, about the team she'd work with, about metrics for success. The conversation was professional, focused, and it gave her a clearer picture of what she would actually be signing up for. It was a real job, not a sinecure or a publicity stunt. It would be difficult and demanding, but it would also be meaningful. As the fountain performed its final show of the evening, the water reaching impossible heights while illuminated in shades of blue and gold, Layla made her decision. "I'll take the job," she said, "but I have conditions." Rashid turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Name them." "First, I want a contract that clearly outlines my role, my responsibilities, and my authority. I want it in writing that my position is not dependent on public perception or media narratives. Second, I want it clearly stated that our professional relationship is exactly that, professional. No ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Third, I want a probationary period of 6 months, where either of us can end the arrangement if it's not working, no hard feeling. And fourth, I want to complete my graduate degree while working. I'll do it part-time on my own time, but I need to finish what I started. It matters to me." Rashid nodded slowly, considering each condition. "Done," he said. "All of it. I'll have the contract drawn up by my lawyers, you can have your own lawyer review it, and we can start whenever you're ready." He extended his hand for a handshake. "Partners?" Layla took his hand, feeling the firm grip, the warmth of his palm. "Partners," she agreed. As they stood there by the fountain with the crowd dispersing around them, Layla felt something shift inside her. She had stepped into her own life, claimed her own agency, made a choice that was neither safe nor easy, but was authentically hers. Whatever came next, success or failure, triumph or disaster, it would be on her terms. And that, she realized, was what freedom actually felt like. The first 3 months of Layla's new life unfolded with a velocity that left her breathless. The contract was signed 2 weeks after their meeting at the fountain. Every condition she had requested honored in precise legal language. Her start date was deliberately delayed another 2 weeks to give her time to tie up loose ends, say proper goodbyes at the Burj Royale, and mentally prepare for the transformation her life was about to undergo. Carlos had hugged her when she came to resign officially, his severe professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine affection. "You were always too good for this place," he said quietly. "Go show them what you're capable of." Her first day at TechBridge International was nothing like she had imagined. She had expected to feel like an imposter walking into that gleaming tower, expected the sidelong glances and whispered speculation. And yes, there was some of that. She heard the fragments of conversations that stopped when she entered a room, saw the curious looks from employees who recognized her from the viral video. But Rashid had been strategic in how he introduced her to the company. He didn't make a big announcement or create artificial fanfare. Instead, he had her meet individually with key department heads, presenting her as a cultural consultant recruited for her expertise, someone whose background happened to include extensive academic training in Arabic language and literature. He gave her credibility by treating her as someone who already had it. Her office was modest by executive standards, but luxurious by any standard she had known before. It had a window with a view of the chic Zayed Road, a proper desk with dual monitors, and most importantly, walls lined with empty bookshelves that she gradually filled with her own collection of Arabic literature and reference materials. She also enrolled back at the university part-time, meeting with Dr. Mansur to map out a plan to complete her graduate degree. The work itself was more challenging than she had anticipated. She wasn't just translating or proofreading. She was diving into the architecture of how the company's software handled Arabic tech, discovering problems that went deeper than language to the fundamental assumptions about how communication worked. She found bugs where Arabic characters wouldn't display properly in certain contexts, marketing campaigns that would be deeply offensive in conservative markets, user interfaces designed by people who had never actually seen how Arabic speakers use technology. Her first major presentation was to the engineering team responsible for the company's flagship communication platform. She stood in front of 30 mostly male developers, many of them brilliant programmers from India, Eastern Europe, and East Asia, and explained why their Arabic support was fundamentally broken. "Arabic is not just English written right to left," she told them, pulling up examples on the screen. "It's a different way of thinking about text entirely. Letters change shape depending on their position in a word. Punctuation works differently. Even the concept of a word boundary. When you design for English and then try to adapt for Arabic, you're building on a foundation that doesn't support the structure you're trying to create. You need to rebuild from the ground up." There was resistance at first. One developer, a Russian man named Dmitry, who was apparently legendary for his coding skills, challenged her repeatedly. "With respect," he said in heavily accented English, "this would require us to refactor months of work. Is it really necessary? Can't Arabic speakers just adapt to how the platform works?" Layla felt every eye in the room on her. waiting to see how she would handle the challenge. She took a breath and switched to Arabic, speaking directly to the 3 Arab developers in the room. "Tell me," she said to them, "when you use this platform, do you ever feel like it was designed for you? Or do you feel like you're a guest in someone else's house trying to fit yourself into spaces that weren't built with you in mind?" The 3 men exchanged glances. One of them, an Egyptian named Ahmed, spoke up reluctantly. "It always feels clunky," he admitted in Arabic, "like we're forcing the language to work in a system that doesn't want it there." Layla switched back to English. "That's what we're trying to fix. Not making Arabic speakers adapt to technology designed without them in mind, but building technology that actually serves them as well as it serves English speakers. If TechBridge wants to be a truly global company, we can't treat non-Western languages as afterthoughts." Rashid had been sitting in the back of the room, observing but not intervening. Now he spoke up. "Layla's right. I brought her here specifically because we've been getting this wrong. Dimitri, I want you to work directly with her team to understand what needs to be changed. This is a priority." The authority of his support mattered. After the meeting, several developers approached Layla to ask more detailed questions, genuinely curious now rather than defensive. Ahmed stayed late to talk to her in Arabic about other issues he'd noticed but had never felt empowered to raise. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. As the weeks passed, Layla found herself settling into rhythms she had thought were lost to her forever. She was using her mind in ways that challenged and excited her. She was part of conversations that mattered, contributing insights that changed outcomes. She was building a team, hiring specialists in different Arabic dialects, cultural consultants from Morocco to Yemen, bringing diverse voices into a company that had operated primarily from a Dubai bubble. But the work also revealed the complexity of what she'd signed up for. The Arab world wasn't monolithic, and what worked in cosmopolitan Dubai might be deeply problematic in more conservative markets. She had to navigate political sensitivities, religious considerations, regional rivalries. She found herself mediating between engineers who wanted simple universal solutions and marketing teams who needed culturally specific approaches. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Her relationship with Rashid evolved in unexpected ways. They worked together closely but carefully, maintaining the professional boundaries they had agreed upon. Their interactions were marked by mutual respect and intellectual sparring. He would challenge her ideas, pushing her to defend her recommendations with data and logic. She would push back on his assumptions, refusing to simply agree with him because he was the boss. It was the kind of dynamic that made both of them sharper, better at their jobs. But there were moments when something else flickered between them, something neither of them acknowledged directly. A conversation that went late into the evening when they were both working on a proposal. The way his expression softened when she got excited about a new idea. The awareness of his presence when he entered a room. It was all carefully unspoken, filed away under the category of things that couldn't be explored without risking everything else. 4 months into her tenure, the company launched a major update to their platform with the Arabic support rebuilt from the ground up based on Layla's recommendations. The response from Arab users was overwhelmingly positive. Tech blogs wrote articles praising TechBridge for finally taking Arabic seriously. Usage in Arab markets increased by 40% in the first month. Rashid forwarded her the coverage with a simple message: "This is what happens when you hire the right person. Thank you." Layla was reading that message late one evening in her office when there was a knock on her door. She looked up to find Rashid standing there, still in his work clothes but looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you have a moment?" he asked in Arabic. "Of course," Layla replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Rashid sat down but didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be wrestling with something, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about the night we met," he finally said, "about how I treated you, what I assumed about you, and I've realized that I never properly apologized. Not really. I said words, but I don't think I fully understood the weight of what I'd done." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "You don't need to," she said. "We've moved past it, have we?" Rashid asked. "Because sometimes I see you in meetings handling things brilliant, and I wonder how many other people like you are out there. Brilliant and capable, and trapped in situations where no one bothers to look beyond their circumstances. And I wonder how many of them I've dismissed or overlooked because I was too arrogant or too busy to see them." Layla set down her pen and gave him her full attention. "What brought this on?" she asked gently. "A meeting today with investors," Rashid said. "One of them made a comment about our diversity initiative, said something about how we were just checking boxes to look good for Western markets. And I found myself getting angry in a way I couldn't fully explain. Because yes, hiring you has been good for our image, but that's not why it mattered. It mattered because you're making us better at what we do. You're forcing us to think differently, to question our assumptions. And I realized that this is what I've been missing in my life for a long time. People who challenge me to be better, rather than people who tell me I'm already great." He looked at her directly, his dark eyes intense. "You did that from the first moment. You didn't treat me like I was special or important. You treated me like I was just another person who needed to be reminded of basic decency. And somehow that became the catalyst for me re-examining everything about how I was living my life." Layla felt the dangerous pull of intimacy in this moment, the way vulnerability created connection. She knew she should redirect the conversation back to safer professional territory, but she also recognized something true in what he was saying, something that resonated with her own experience. experience. I think we both changed that night, she said carefully. You saw beyond my uniform, but I also saw beyond your wealth, beyond the person you present to the world. I saw someone who was capable of growth, of humility. That's rare in people who have achieved what you have. Most people at your level stop growing because they've convinced themselves they've already arrived. There was a long silence between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Rashid stood, the moment breaking. I should let you get back to work, he said. I just wanted you to know that I see what you're doing here, what you're building. It's remarkable. Thank you, Layla said, her voice steady even as her heart raced. After he left, she sat in her office staring at the lights of the city below. She'd been so careful to maintain boundaries, to keep their relationship strictly professional, but she couldn't deny what was growing between them, something that went beyond gratitude or professional respect. It was recognition, the deep human connection of being truly seen by another person, and that was more dangerous than any corporate intrigue or public speculation could ever be. She thought about her conversation with Dr. Mansour, about Tarifa's poem and the need to embrace all parts of yourself. She had reclaimed her intellectual life, had proven to herself and others that she was more than her circumstances. But in doing so, had she locked away other parts of herself, other needs and desires, because they felt too risky, too complicated? The question haunted her as she finally shut down her computer and prepared to leave for the night. She had built something real here, something she was proud of. She had a career that challenged her, a purpose that mattered, financial security she had only dreamed of months ago. She was even back in school, working toward the degree that had once seemed lost forever. By any objective measure, her life had been transformed. But as she rode the elevator down from the tower, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real transformation, the one that would truly change everything, was still ahead of her. And it had nothing to do with career success or public recognition. It had everything to do with whether she had the courage to be vulnerable, to risk the carefully rebuilt structure of her life for something as uncertain and dangerous as human connection. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Layla stepped out into the night, carrying that question with her like a secret burning in her chest. The turning point came 6 months after Layla had started at TechBridge, on a night when she wasn't expecting anything to change. She was working late on a presentation for an upcoming conference in Beirut where she would be speaking about culturally responsive technology design. The office was mostly empty, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew making their rounds. She had successfully defended her graduate thesis that afternoon, a revised and expanded version of her original work on longing and pre-Islamic poetry. Dr. Mansour had been in the audience, beaming with pride. Her mother had attended via video call from Jordan, tears streaming down her face. It had been a moment of pure triumph, the reclamation of something she thought was lost forever. But now, alone in her office, with the city lights spreading out below her like a field of earthbound stars, she felt an unexpected emptiness. She had achieved everything she set out to accomplish. The job was secure and fulfilling. Her degree was complete. Her family was financially stable. By every metric, she should have been satisfied. So why did she feel like something essential was still missing? A knock on her door made her look up. Rashid stood there, and she could see immediately that something was different about him. His usual composure was fractured, his expression raw in a way she had never seen before. I heard about your thesis defense, he said in Arabic, walking into her office without waiting for an invitation. Congratulations. That's a major accomplishment. Thank you, Layla replied, studying his face. Rashid, what's wrong? He sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk and ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration that seemed completely out of character for someone usually so controlled. I've been lying to you, he said. Not about the job, not about your capabilities, but about why I wanted you here, why I've been so invested in your success. Layla felt her heart rate accelerate. What do you mean? From the moment you sat across from me in that restaurant, Rashid said, his voice rough with honesty. You've been in my head. I told myself it was intellectual admiration, professional respect. I told myself I was offering you a job because it made business sense. And all of that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth is that you reminded me of what it feels like to be fully alive, to be challenged and seen and understood by another person. And I've been terrified of that because it threatens everything I've built, all the careful walls I've constructed to protect myself from vulnerability. Layla's breath caught. This was the conversation they had both been avoiding for 6 months. The acknowledgement of everything that had been building beneath the surface of their professional relationship. And what are you saying now? She asked quietly. I'm saying that I can't keep pretending anymore, Rashid replied. I'm saying that you are the most remarkable person I've met, not because of your education or your skills, though those are extraordinary, but because of who you are at your core. Your integrity, your courage, your refusal to diminish yourself for anyone's comfort. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, and I know that complicates everything. And I know it puts you in an impossible position. But I had to tell you because living with this secret was becoming unbearable. The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and beautiful. Layla felt a dozen conflicting emotions surge through her at once. There was fear, because this was exactly what she had been guarding against, the blurring of boundaries that could destroy everything she had built. There was anger because he had placed this burden on her, forcing her to navigate feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to face. But beneath all of that was something else. something she'd been suppressing for months. The truth that she felt it too. That connection that went deeper than professional respect or gratitude. That recognition of finding someone who saw all of you and didn't ask you to be anything other than what you were. "This is unfair," she said finally, her voice shaking slightly. "You're my boss. You have power over my career, my livelihood. How am I supposed to respond to this without worrying about what happens if I don't feel the same way? Or what happens if I do?" Rashid nodded, looking miserable. "I know. That's why I've been silent for so long. But I can't keep working with you every day, seeing you, talking to you, and pretending that my feelings don't exist. So I'm giving you a choice. If you don't feel the same way, if this is completely one-sided, tell me and I will never mention it again. We'll go back to our professional relationship and I will make sure your position here is secure regardless. But if there's any part of you that feels what I feel, then we need to figure out how to navigate this honestly." Layla stood up and walked to the window, needing distance to think clearly. Below her, Dubai pulsed with life and light, a city of impossible dreams made real through sheer will and audacity. She thought about everything she had learned over these past months, about courage and vulnerability, about the difference between safety and freedom. When she turned back to face Rashid, she had made her decision. "I do feel it," she said, and watched relief flood his face. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not the waitress you rescued. I'm not some project or redemption arc for you. I'm your equal. And if we do this, if we try to build something personal alongside the professional relationship, it has to be from that foundation. No power dynamics, no savior complexes, no treating me like I owe you anything." Rashid stood up, his expression serious. "You never owed me anything, Layla. You earned everything you have here. The job, the success, the respect of your colleagues, that's all you. I was just smart enough to recognize it and give you the platform to show everyone else. So what do we do?" Layla asked. "How do we navigate this without destroying what we've built professionally?" Carefully, Rashid said, a small smile appearing on his face. "Transparently, we tell HR that we're entering into a relationship and establish clear boundaries between our personal and professional interactions. You report to someone else in the organization, so there's no direct power dynamic. We're honest with our colleague. We don't hide it, but we don't make a spectacle of it. And if at any point you feel that the relationship is compromising your professional autonomy, we address it immediately." Layla considered this, looking for the flaws in the plan, the ways it could go wrong, but she also recognized something important. She had spent so much of her life trying to protect herself from risk, from the possibility of loss or failure, that she had become smaller than she needed to be. The last 6 months had taught her that growth required risk, that transformation demanded courage. This was just another form of that same lesson. "Okay," she said, "we try this, but slowly. No rushing, no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations to the world. We figure out if this is real by living it, not by performing." "Deal," Rashid said, and the smile that spread across his face was so genuine, so full of hope, that Layla felt her own fears begin to ease. They stood there in her office, the city lights creating a backdrop of impossible beauty, and took the first tentative steps towards something neither of them had planned but both of them needed. It wasn't a fairy tale ending with all questions answered and all conflicts resolved. It was something better. It was two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other, to risk comfort for connection, to build something real in a world that often prioritized appearance over authenticity. In the months that followed, Layla and Rashid navigated their relationship with the same care and intelligence they brought to their work. There were challenges, moments when the boundaries between personal and professional blurred uncomfortably, times when they had to check their assumptions and recommit to treating each other as equals. But there was also joy, the deep satisfaction of being known and loved not despite your complexities but because of them. Layla continued to build her department, expanding her team and taking on increasingly ambitious projects. She completed her graduate degree and began publishing academic papers again, contributing to conversations about language and technology in ways that bridged her two worlds. She became a sought-after speaker at conferences, known not as the viral waitress but as a leading expert in culturally responsive design. Rashid, for his part, began to change the way he ran his company, creating more pathways for people from non-traditional backgrounds, questioning the assumptions that had shaped his hiring and promotion practices. He credited Layla publicly for teaching him to see beyond surface credentials to underlying potential, and he made it a mission to ensure TechBridge was a place where talent could be recognized regardless of where it came from. A year after that fateful night in the Burj Royale, Layla stood on a stage at a technology conference in Abu Dhabi, speaking to an audience of thousands about the importance of cultural authenticity in global product design. In the front row sat her mother, healthy and proud, having traveled from Jordan to see her daughter reclaim the life she had once set aside. Beside her mother sat Rashid, his expression one of pure admiration and love, and scattered throughout the audience were members of her team, the diverse group of specialists she had assembled, each one a person who might have been overlooked in a different system, each one proving that excellence comes in forms that don't always fit traditional molds. As Layla concluded her talk and the audience rose in applause, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a challenge meant to humiliate, issued by a man too arrogant to see beyond his own assumptions, but it had become something far more profound. It had become a story about recognition, recognition, about the courage to claim your own worth, about the transformation that happens when we refuse to accept the limitations others try to place on us. She had learned that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with grand gestures, but with small acts of defiance, with refusing to be invisible, with insisting on being seen for who you truly are. And she had learned that the most powerful form of success isn't the external validation of wealth or status or viral fame, but the internal knowledge that you are living a life that honors all parts of yourself, that your work matters, that your voice has value, that your story belongs to you and you alone. As she left the stage and was immediately surrounded by people wanting to talk, to ask questions, to connect with the ideas she had shared, Layla caught Rashid's eye across the crowd. He smiled at her, a private smile full of shared understanding, and she smiled back. They had both been transformed by what had started as a simple challenge in a restaurant. They had both learned to see beyond surface assumptions to the complex humanity beneath, and in doing so, they had created something neither of them could have built alone, a partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the shared commitment to building a world where everyone had the opportunity to be fully seen. This story reminds us that moments of change often arrive in unexpected forms, that the people we dismiss might be exactly the ones who transform us, and that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. If this story of transformation, recognition, and the power of refusing to be invisible moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate the complexity of human experience. Click that notification bell so you never miss an upload, because every story we share is about real people navigating the messy, beautiful reality of becoming who they're meant to be.